Do, do. Hey, folks. Good to see people. We'll get started in just a minute. I'm assuming you mean Jack Kirby and not me. Oh, Appreciate it. Thank you.
Aw, shit.
How's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
Good, good. I didn't mean to catch you mid pour. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Also, what is your actual name?
Ah, did I never tell you Brian? My name's Brian.
Gotcha, gotcha. Well, obviously, Dave. Yeah, I don't know that I knew your actual name. Um,
I realize now that I never dropped it. So
Keeping
there we
that
go.
shit secret identity style, baby.
Exactly, exactly. I don't know who's out there. It's actually hilarious. You said that my vice principal at the school that I worked at, she found my TikTok because she has a TikTok, and I showed
Is
up.
that good? Is that bad?
I mean, you've seen it. I just talk about comics, and now that I teach a
Yeah,
class on
yeah.
graphic novels, I can chalk it up to like professional development. So there you
Okay,
go.
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, yeah. No, she thought it was very funny because she was like, I was flipping, and then I heard your voice. I was like, oh, okay. Hope you learned a lot
You're like,
about.
oh, which TikTok did you find? My comics one or my spicy one?
I keep that one very private. Yeah,
Right, yeah. Let me just sync my headphones. I'm 1 second.
yeah, yeah. Take your time. Take your time. Got a lot of folks here. Good to see everybody. Thank you for stopping by. Hello, hello. As Shuby Dubert said, give it a like. Some more folks will hopefully find it. Oh, all right, Dave, you good?
Yo,
All right, cool. You were buffering there for a second. I thought I lost you for a second there. All right. So
we
I
did it.
part of the reason I wanted to talk to you today is obviously the when was it? It was probably like a month or so ago. I made some TikTok about Jack Kirby and you hopped on saying, "Oh, let's talk about Commandi in particular." But I also wanted to talk
Oh
to
yeah,
you.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But I also wanted to talk to you because you are a writer and artist who I have come to like really, really respect and enjoy the works of over the last couple of months.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out real quick to anybody watching. Your book Night Hunters from Floating World Comics, your graphic novel Everyone is Tulip, which you wrote, and art by Nicole Gu. Incredible stuff. Highly recommend anybody watching this tonight. If they don't already follow Dave, give Dave a follow and definitely check those books out because they're really great. And if there's any Star Trek fans out there, you're writing a Star Trek comic. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. Star Trek Voyager Seven's Reckoning. The trade came out I think this Wednesday.
Oh,
Time has no
perfect.
meaning. I don't remember if it was this Wednesday or last Wednesday. Kind of don't remember.
Hey,
Um,
it's there. It should still be there, hopefully. Yeah, yeah. So go get
unless they've all sold, unless every Star
it.
Trek fan has bought all of the trades. Yes, they're there.
Well, if only. Hopefully that'll happen by the end of the month. They'll all get it. Well,
Yeah, for real.
the first question I wanted to ask you is what was your first exposure to Jack Kirby? Do you have a memory of when you feel like the first time you were like, oh, this is a Jack Kirby piece of art or comic?
Well, there's the first time I encountered a Jack Kirby character, and then there's the first time I realized it was Jack Kirby drawing.
Right.
The first time I encountered a Kirby character is I don't know if you remember this, but I feel like we're similar and close to the same age, and kids
Probably.
our age had these, like, they were
blue felt covered hardcovers that they were kind of like the Mahatmas, but they weren't full. And on the cover of it was this blue felt texture, and it had an inlaid silver surfer etched into the cover. And it was basically like a history of Marvel Comics and a history of the Marvel Universe kind of tied together. So parts of it were like, and then they went bankrupt, and parts of it were like, and then parts of it were like, this is who Stiltman is. And that cover, the Jack Kirby, it wasn't a Jack Kirby, it was a Ron Lim. Now, as an adult, I know it was a Ron Lim. At the time, I didn't really understand that people drew comics. I mean, I knew they did, but it just didn't. The drawings felt so superhuman that I was like, whoa, the Silver Surfer is so cool.
I feel like a lot of people of our generation learned so much about comics from those like encyclopedias that came out, because we had the internet, but it was not existing the way it did now. And I think that's a very common thing for people in our age range, of just like, you found one of those DK encyclopedias and that's how you learned about
100%
all these things. So it's funny that you say that too, because I feel like, talking about like not necessarily knowing who the artist is at the time, I feel like Kirby, because his style is so distinct, for a lot of young comic book fans or people who are really getting into comics, he's the first artist that you're like, that's Jack Kirby. You can look at that and be like, that's clearly him. Totally,
and sometimes in a bad way. Like, I know a lot of younger people didn't really appreciate him for the genius that he is, because they were kind of just like, I'm here for the cross-hatching. What the fuck are these squiggly lines?
I love this idea.
Why does everyone have this weird page boy haircut? I hate this.
I love the idea of a pretentious middle schooler who knows what cross-hatching is. And it's just like, what is this? What is this trite?
Apparently we went to very different middle schools, because I 100% A, was that guy, and B, had multiple people in my middle school situation that were like that, where they were just like, I don't fuck no, man. I don't fuck with that Jack Kirby. He's got that weird anatomy.
That is too funny. Well, we definitely did, because I think I was literally the only person in my middle school who read comic books. I had a very solitary comic book fandom growing up, sadly. But
I say that, but my situation in real life, that was mostly played up for comedy. My situation in real life is somewhat similar to yours, in that I was the only person that was hardcore into comics.
Sure.
But I had friends who like loved the shows and collected the toys and were kind of like 2 rings out. So I would be like, look at this fucking crazy like Marvel 2-in-1 where like the Thing fights Doctor Doom or whatever. And they were like, yeah, I love Doctor Doom. He's a badass. I don't want to read that though. I just want to watch him in like the cartoons and shit.
Right. There's always that barrier of entry, it seems like, that certain people just can't cross when it comes to actually buying a comic book month to month. It's a fascinating phenomenon. So you feel like Silver Surfer was your first time being like, that's a Jack Kirby character. Do you have a memory of like your first time being like, oh, now I see, this is Jack Kirby, I get it now?
I don't really have a memory of the first time that I really. I can tell you the first Kirby comic that I like remember buying.
Please, yeah.
I worked at a comic book store in high school, and I bought a supervillain team-up issue where it's Submariner and Doctor Doom. And I remember, I think I probably had Jack Kirby stuff before that, but that's the first one I remember buying, because it was like, I'm not somebody who really buys back issues of like, this is a key issue, fucking, Moon Knight's first appearance or Werewolf by Night or whatever. Like, I'm not that type of collector.
Yeah.
The stuff I care about is honestly stuff nobody cares about, so it makes it easier on my wallet.
Hey, for sure.
Yeah, so I'm more of the like, I collect like the Drek. Like I'm like this. I love the stuff that nobody cares about. Like I collect a lot of like black and white Explosion era self-published stuff. I collect a lot of kind of I collect a lot of weirdo shit from smaller publishers like Eclipse and First and those kind of like mid 80s indie boom companies. I love that stuff.
So I'm actually glad that you brought that up, because part of the reason I was excited to talk to you was because you really have an affinity for this later era of Kirby, where he is working with Pacific Comics, which, you know, I consider myself somebody who's pretty well versed in comics. There we go. I consider myself someone who's pretty well versed in this stuff, but my knowledge of it is, when it comes to that later era, is pretty spotty. And for anybody out there who's watching and doesn't know, you know, I'm sure you have knowledge of like Kirby going back and forth between Marvel and DC at various points in his career.
Yeah.
And it eventually got to a point where I'm going to say late 70s, he kind of decides to move away from comics, gets into animation, works on shows like Thundar the Barbarian, which some of you might know from
putting
Network reruns.
saying decide
Yeah,
decide that he to do that is very a polite way of saying it. He gets pushed out and he's like, I need health insurance because I'm having some health problems, and Roz is having health problems. The only way I can do this is by working in animation. And his assistant at the time, Mark Evanier, was a big animation guy and got him a job at Funimation. Right?
I'm not 100% sure. Was it Hanna-Barbera? I feel like it might have been Hanna-Barbera who did Thundar, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, they definitely are the ones who produced that show. But I think it actually might have been Funimation who did the actual animation. Maybe. I don't know why I'm stuck on him working at Hanna. I don't know. But yes, he freelanced for a bunch of animation companies and got health insurance because of that, because there's an actual animation union. Even though they're not technically allowed to call it a union, it's a guild. So, you know, they're the ghetto of the film industry, where comics is just like the ghetto of society. There's no we don't even have a guild. Like, we have nothing. Like, freelancers in comics just get fucked.
And I know you saw my TikTok earlier, but I said that comment about, like, you can track so much of the history of comics through Jack Kirby's career. And I think the later part of Jack Kirby's career is where you start to see the shift in creators realizing, we're getting screwed. We're getting fucked here. And
yeah, I mean, I think everybody always did think that, but I think that there's just, it's real. I don't think civilians actually understand how stagnant the wages have been. Like, page rates currently in comics have not gone up since the 1970s.
Jesus.
Like, that's fucking crazy. Like, the average rate for paying a writer is like about $100, and the average rate of paying like a penciler is about like 150 to 200, which in the 70s, Steve Ditko was getting $100 a page.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's horrible.
Horrible. I knew it was bad. I don't think I ever realized it was that level of bad.
Yeah, I mean, but see, this is also the hard part, because it's a freelance economy. Whenever somebody says that, then there's 15 people in the comments going, "Oh, well, they should have just like looked at the contracts better and advocated for themselves more," which is just like, bro, that's not really how this works. Like, I wish there was more negotiation in comics contracts, and sometimes there is. This is not a blanket thing, but a lot of times it's, you just get given a contract and it's, and if you're sign that, or are we going to go find someone else?
And if you're negotiating, you probably have the clout or the name recognition to negotiate. You know what I mean? Bless you.
Yeah, absolutely.
The average person just getting in on the ground floor of the industry is not going to have the clout to do that. PJ Draws in my comments said, looked up Thundar the Barbarian was Ruby Spears. Ruby Spears was Thundar the Barbarian.
Ruby Spears. Thanks. Thanks, bro. I knew it wasn't fully Hanna-Barbera. Ruby Spears also tried, I don't know if you've seen this, Brian. They did I'm a huge fan of the Phantom. I love the Phantom. And I'm like a 90-year-old man
spandex.
But
Phantom?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the Ghost Who Walks, the Guardian of the Eastern Dark. Yeah,
of course. Billy Zane, yes.
Billy Zane, slam evil, baby. Ruby Spears tried to do a Phantom cartoon where Jack would have been the art director of the show. Whoa. And so there are some pages floating around that he did for pitch boards, where it's like the Phantom riding a horse, the Phantom in front of the Skull Cave, the Phantom and Demon, his wolf dog, like
that's
running,
rad.
and they look awesome.
I'm gonna have to dig those up. That sounds great. That sounds really
yeah,
cool.
they're really, really cool. There's a bunch of stuff that Ruby Spears tried to do that with Jack that just kind of never went anywhere.
And that's kind of the sad thing too, is it feels like there was reading. I read Mark Avanier's Kirby King of Comics biography, which is really great. And there's a lot of discussion in there about how when he was working in that industry, he was around a lot of people who grew up reading the comics. There was a lot of like recognition for his work that he had done from those animators, and it's kind of sad that it seems like there were so many interesting, great ideas that just for whatever reason never came to fruition. PJ Dross says something in the comments here that I want to use to transition to the next point. Comics are scary. The only way to win at this point is to get that good Netflix money. And I think that brings us to what I wanted to talk about with Eclipse, because I bought a stack of the Captain Victory and the Galactic Rangers comics after you had recommended them. And going through it and looking at the Eclipse lineup, the talent that they put together kind of reminds me of Image in a lot of ways. They had a lot of A-list people. They had Bernie Wrightson. They had there you go. They had Steve Ditko. They had Mike Grell. Like I'm so shocked that this company feels like it's kind of, not to be insulting, but it feels like it's kind of a footnote in comics history, and yet they had all this A-list talent doing original creations. I don't know if you have any insights into what happened there, any thoughts on that, but it just really surprised me reading through those.
Yeah, I mean, so the two comic companies that I'm really obsessed with from that time period are Eclipse and Pacific. Pacific specifically is really interesting to me. They were started by two brothers, the Shanes brothers, William Shanes and other Shanes.
Shane Shanes.
And Shane Shanes. And their story briefly is fascinating. It basically is, they were guys who there were two brothers who ran like a mail order service out of San Diego, where they would just like flip comics. They would buy comics from distributors, mail them directly to people. And it got so successful that they were able to parlay that into a chain of retail stores in the San Diego area. I think they had 3 different Pacific Comics stores, a distribution company, Pacific Comics Distribution, where they serviced most of the Western coast, because this is before the distributor wars, or during the beginning of the distributor wars, where basically, you could, if you had enough money to get a warehouse, you could just declare yourself a distributor and service a bunch of other local retailers and supply them with comics, order comics wholesale from publishers. And so then off of the back of the retail chain and the distribution chain, Bill Shanes was like, we could probably like publish our own comics. And Mark Evanier shopped at one of their stores. So they talked to him and were like, hey, does Jack Kirby want to put something out? Because this is like in that weird dead period where he hadn't put out any comics in a while because he was working in animation. And in his free time, Kirby had been working on a graphic novel about this character, Captain Victory, which he didn't have a publisher for. It's just Jack was like me, something of a workaholic, and when he wasn't working, he was working. So I think he had like probably 50 pages of Captain Victory stuff, and the Shanes brothers drove up there with Mark Evanier, and they were like, hey, so we're looking into starting our own publisher. We have the supply chain. Like, what do you think about maybe putting out your comic through us? And he was like, I've gotten fucked by everybody, bro. Like I'm kind of just doing this just for me at this point. Like I'm an old man. Like I don't really want to fucking do this. And they gave him the best deal other than the Image deal that he got right before he died, that he'd ever gotten. They just took print rights, which for anybody who doesn't know in comics, most comics that are creator owned are not creator owned. They're not actually owned by the creators. There's a percentage of them that are owned by the creators, because there's no union, so comics just everybody gets fucked. And the Kirby situation was so great because the Shanes brothers kind of were trying to pay it forward, right? They were like, we're going to try and really, obviously we need you to kind of like lend legitimacy to our company, but we're going to like really try and help you, get a book out there where you could actually own the film rights, where you could actually own the copyright of it. And they did, and it lasted for 13 issues, 12 issues, and then a special. And for anybody who hasn't read it, I highly recommend it. It is, the thing I like about it the most is that, that's him right there, Captain Victory, with the trademark weird page boy haircut. The thing that's so interesting to me about it, because he did 2 books for them. He did Captain Victory and the Galactic Rangers, and which at various points in its run and in multiple issues are referred to interchangeably as Captain Victory and his Galactic Rangers and Captain Victory and the Galactic Rangers. Like, even in the first issue, the title treatment says the Galactic Rangers, but the interior says his Galactic Rangers.
Yeah,
so who the fuck knows what it is?
Well, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit because PJ Draws in the chat when he mentioned they mentioned the thing about the Netflix deal. It just made me think like it's such a different climate now in comics than it was back then, because even though there's definitely still a lot of issues with creator rights, it was such a new frontier that 2 guys could just be like, let's just start distributing comics, let's just start a comic book company and get some of the most iconic names in comic books to just start publishing with us. And they even said in the chat, this is real harrowing viewing for someone trying to do comics, with a laugh at the end. But Dave is proof that you can do it to this day and still feel creatively fulfilled. So don't be too crestfallen because of this chat.
But it also is like, just to dovetail off of your point though, of like, sometimes it just takes a person to do it. Mm-hmm. That's the thing I love so much about comics. Like, yes, there are a lot of people that offer terrible deals and screw people over, and it's not great on that end. But there also are a lot of people that are really committed to this like Pyrrhic ideal, this platonic kind of reaching for the, our better angels situation. Like my first, I've self-published like fucking 12 books. So, there's a road, right? It's a process. But once you get there, once you've earned the respect of some of those people, our first, Nicole Gu and I's first graphic novel that got officially published, Fuck Off Squad, was put out by Avi Ehrlich, who runs Silver Sprocket, which, if anybody doesn't know, Silver Sprocket is a former punk record label that rebooted itself as a comic book company. And it's one dude. Like, Avi has built an empire off of just being nimble and kind of looking at the corners and being like, I could get a distribution situation here, and I could throw a party with a band there, and we could sell comics to people at the party. And like, they published our book Fuck Off Squad, which really we were able to use as a calling card, and Nicole got Shadow of the Batgirl, the original graphic novel from DC, off of Fuck Off Squad. Yeah. And, same thing with Night Hunters. Like, we became friends because I think, this is my memory anyway, we became friends because I just sent you a PDF, right?
Yes,
I was like, hey.
Yeah, you somehow, for some reason, thought I made good TikToks. And then you sent me the
Night Hunter. Come on, you do.
You sent me the Night Hunter PDF, and I read it, and I was like, this kicks ass, and I definitely need to share this with the people. And then that was, the rest was history.
And like, the Night Hunter story is exactly the same. Floating World Comics is a publisher that is run out of, it's very similar to the Pacific story. It is a publishing company that puts out multiple graphic novels a year that's run out of a comic book store in Portland, run by Jason Levian, called Floating World Comics. And they put out some of the coolest, most bizarre, interesting, indie voices today. And I'm saying that as somebody who is published by them, so I'm a little biased. But, just look at the stuff they put out. Like Chuck Forsman, speaking of Netflix deals, Mr. 2 Netflix deals, Charles Forsman.
End of the
they
fucking
put out
world.
His Revenger comics, right?
Oh, Revenger rules. I love Revenger.
Yeah.
Similarly, in Brooklyn, New York, there's Desert Island Comics. I believe they do some distribution and publishing as well. There are avenues out there for independent creators. It definitely takes a little bit of digging, but there are lots of ways to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, and also, like, just speaking to your viewer who was a comic book person, like, or trying to be a comic book person or whatever. I don't know where you're at, but just do it. Like, I know it's depressing. Yeah. Okay. Now put the pencil to the paper and publish the book, because that's the reason why comics exists. It's the only art form where you can be an individual and make the thing yourself and get it in front of people. Really, like,
Yeah.
it's,
No, it's
you know,
very
the
true.
distribution system. The distribution system sucks. Like, it's really hard to get it in front of people. But once you've cracked that little thing, whatever. That's not a metaphor. That's not an analogy. That's just, those are words.
I see where you go. We're
But you know
still
what I
going with
mean?
this. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like, once it's really like, there. The funny side is that the business of comics still fucking sucks, but the community side of comics is awesome. I've
Absolutely.
never met as many warm, you know, awesome people in my life. Like, going to conventions it's such an uplifting thing, because you just run into people who are genuinely in it for the passion. Like, they genuinely just love the medium.
Absolutely. PJ Draw says, "Consider me motivated." So you got them back on. You got them on track. Don't
Fuck
worry.
yeah, dude. Fuck yeah.
So, well, on that topic of you know, the art form where you can kind of do it all on your own, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Captain Victory book and dig into, like, what about that particular book appeals to you, because I'm reading it and I enjoy it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It feels like it's got a bit of a harder edge to it than most Kirby stuff, which I found really interesting. And I was a little taken aback by it at first, but I was like, this is interesting, weird stuff that I'm not used to from him. And then I get like halfway through it, and all of a sudden he's clearly making allusions to the New Gods, which is my personal favorite Jack Kirby, because that was kind of my Jack Kirby entry point, was all the New God stuff, Mr. Miracle in particular. And I was just kind of like stunned and flabbergasted at the way he's just like going for it and finding the new way to reinvent his own mythos in this independent book. So what was it to you that really appealed to you about Captain Victory when you first got your hands on it?
The reason why Captain Victory and his Galactic Rangers is my favorite Kirby book is because you can feel Jack Kirby trying to do it. Most of his work is so effortless. Most of his work is so, it feels like it just drops out of his brain onto the page. And also, some people say his dialogue is stilted, or that he uses too many exclamation points or whatever. And I don't think it is. I think it's like Ditko, in that Ditko has a very specific vernacular that once you learn how to read it, it makes sense. And then Ditko has his own like ideogram almost, where there's like little dots and dashes and like symbols. I don't know if you've ever read his self-published stuff, but he does this thing where
a little bit
he like he denotes people like inhaling and exhaling in this weird gasp way, where he'll draw this little like weird explosion. So it'll be like, he was really into minimalism for a period, and so he would only put like 2 or 3 words and then these little symbols and shapes that would denote like how they were talking, and just like
right.
It was really weird. And you kind of had to figure out how to read it. And I think Kirby's kind of similar in that he has a very specific way of writing, and he's very socially progressive. And I like the fact that at fucking 80 years old, he was like listening to, talk radio and trying to make political allegories and still do his whole cosmic gods in space thing, but still be progressive and, quite frankly, maybe not always succeeding. Like, I like the fact that Captain Victory's a little rough around the edges, that he kind of his reach is exceeding his grasp at this point, but he's trying to make those two things come together.
Right.
And that's really, to me, that's just the most uplifting thing, to think that at 80 years old, or however old he was when he made it, that you would still be pushing, you would still be experimenting, you would still be striving. The characters are fine. I like Captain Victory a lot. I like Clorvis, whatever the
Yeah,
fuck that guy's name is.
Clorvis was the one I found the most intriguing. I found those backup stories where you get to see his like Roman-inspired planet because they were aliens who had a giant what was the word I'm looking for? I almost said microscope, telescope that they could
Yeah.
see the opposite of microscope, that they could see Earth, and they saw specifically Rome, and were like, these people seem like they got it figured out. Let's just emulate them exactly.
Let's just do that.
Yeah, let's just do that,
Yeah.
and it works out great for them. But no, I found that really intriguing, and it's also interesting because, like you said, 80 years old, he's doing different things. There's so many character designs that are so unlike Kirby. There's the character that's like the floating head on the disc, and you know, Kirby,
Mr. Egg.
Mr. Egg.
Called?
It's something along
Yeah.
those lines, yeah. But it's like Kirby loves a guy with a weird head, but even that is still like distinct from, say, your Modocs or your Armanzolas. And then there's also the issue where Captain Victory goes to the female computer. And the best way I can describe that for anyone who hasn't seen it, imagine if Jack Kirby drew the alien from The Thing. That's what it looks like. And I'm like, I'm not used to seeing a Kirby thing that looks like liquidy and flowy. And I'm like, this is so interesting that, like you're saying, even at 80 years old, he's still doing things that are different, that he's pushing his own art style in a unique way. I just want to answer a thing in the chat here real fast. PJ Draws, I put out 2 issues of a series. I have 2 more already finished, so look forward to that, I guess. Go follow PJ
What's the name
Draws.
of your series, bro?
PJ Draws, drop it in the chat. If you have a link, drop that in the chat too. And then, is there a collected version of Captain Victory, or should I be tracking down the original issues? Unfortunately, there's no collected version of it. I got mine off of mycomicshop.org. That's a good website for getting back issues, and they had pretty much all the Captain Victory. I think they were just missing the last 2 of the series, so I would definitely
which is so strange. I don't understand. Like, I'd be so curious to talk to somebody at Dynamite and be like, so you guys had the rights to do Captain Victory, but you didn't reprint the original stuff? This is so weird. What the fuck? How did... There has to have been something there. There has to have been some...
for sure. Legalese
rights issue or... Because they're at one point because they've done a couple pseudo revivals, kind of.
Right.
Dynamite had the rights in the mid 2000s or 2010s, whenever the fuck that was. Time has no meaning, and they did like a full 30 issue, or at least it felt like 30 issues because there's so many fucking covers. Kind of show run by Alex Ross. He did a bunch of designs for it. I have not read that stuff. No offense to anybody who works on it, but it looked not interesting to me at all. And then there was his grandson, Jeremy Kirby, I believe, did a rebooted Captain Victory that they self-published that only lasted 2 issues, I believe.
Interesting.
And then there's another Dynamite series called Captain Victory. Or no, the other one's called just Captain Victory. And then there's a Joe Casey mini-series that was a kind of like an art house reboot of it called Captain Victory and His Galactic Rangers.
And that
is amazing. I can't recommend enough.
And for anybody who's watching, the Joe Casey one is on Comixology Unlimited. So if you have a subscription to that, you can pop that out of the library and read that right now if you wanted to. I haven't read it yet because I wanted to read the Kirby one first, but I've got it loaded up to check out.
It's really cool. The high concept for the Joe Casey, the high concept one for the Joe Casey one is basically that it's almost kind of like, what if Captain Victory was rebooted as a prestige level movie franchise, but where different scenes in the movie were directed, in air quotes, by indie comics creators. So there's recurring segments where certain locations, there's a recurring flashback on Captain Victory's ship where him and Clorvis are having this exposition dump that runs through various issues, and that stuff is all drawn by Jim Rugg. There's another kind of runner that's all drawn by Ulysses Farinas.
That's awesome.
The main storyline is drawn by Matthew Fox. It's really, really it's just exemplary work, and quite frankly, it's the best thing that that Dynamite has ever published, and probably the least read thing that Dynamite has ever published.
Well, and that's the it goes back to what you said at the beginning, that you have a tendency to be drawn towards the more esoteric and forgotten things, and
also, think about who the stalwart readers of Dynamite comics are. They're men of a certain age, and they care about boobs. Like all of their comics have boobs in them, and you know what doesn't have any boobs in it?
Captain Victory. No, a distinct lack of boobs in Captain
Yeah,
Victory.
zero boobage happening there.
Although, in defense of Dynamite, I will say I don't know if you've read the Christopher Priest Vampirella. It's quite good.
No, I have not.
No, quite good. Interesting stuff. I mean, obviously it has.
Is it in continuity with other stuff, or is it just like Christopher Priest rebooting it?
It is. I know nothing about Vampirella, and there's a lot of things where I'm like, okay, this is clearly like referencing. I'm like, she's not a vampire. She's from a planet where
no, she's an alien. Yeah,
like that comes up in issue 1. I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, she's an alien from planet Draculon.
Right,
yeah.
Of course. I should have obviously.
Come on, man. Come on, Brian. Come on. Have you seen the? You haven't seen the movie, bro?
No, I haven't. There's a movie.
Dude, yeah. There's a movie starring Talia Soto, the woman who played Katana in Mortal Kombat from the 90s, directed by the guy who made Chopping Mall. I'm blanking on his name. He made Chopping Mall and Barbarians. And
was this like a
Jim Warnowski? Jim Warnowski.
Was this like a direct-to-video movie, or what was?
Yeah, basically.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
it's like a directed VHS movie, and it's super weird because Robert Plant is the main villain. Like the musician is the main villain. I think it's Robert Plant. The main guy is the lead singer from I'm not into fucking classic rock, but the lead singer of either The Who or or Led Zeppelin. I don't remember which now.
I believe it's Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin. Right?
So what I'm saying is it might not be Robert Plant. It's either Robert Plant or the guy who's the lead singer of The Who, who I have
I see what you're saying. Okay, gotcha. I thought you weren't sure which one Robert Plant was the lead singer of.
Yeah. So he's like the main. She fights like not Dracula in the movie.
Wow.
And he played him. That's so which band was Keith Moon in? The drummer.
Keith Moon was in The Who.
Okay, so it's the main singer. So the lead singer from The Who then.
That seems like something he would do. I believe he would do that over Robert Plant, actually.
Which is the only reason I know this is because Keith Moon was such a huge Vampirella fan that whatever the lead singer's name is, I don't remember his name now. He starred in the movie as the evil villain guy as a tribute to Keith Moon.
Wow!
And he wrote an original song. Yeah, he wrote an original song that's the theme song to the movie that he performs in the movie, called like Rain of Blood or something.
Incredible.
Or Taste My Blood, or it's got blood in the title.
This is so insane, and I can't believe I've never heard of this. This is just such a bizarre curio. I can't believe this is
the weirdest part of the movie, though. So for anybody who doesn't know, Vampirella was created by Frank Frazetta, Trina Robbins, and Forrest J. Ackerman. Forrest J. Ackerman being the publisher of Famous Monsters of Filmland. Of
course.
And in the Vampirella movie, she when she first gets to Earth or whatever, she goes to a normal human's house and has to hide there from the cops or something. And she breaks into a nerd's room, and his name is Forrest, and he looks exactly like Forrest J. Ackerman. And she puts on her Vampirella costume, and he's like, and they have this weird he's got a crush on her, and he helps her do something, and then she kisses him on the cheek, and he passes out, and then it's thanks, Forrest, and then runs off to do her superhero thing.
Incredible. And people say that doesn't have value. Ridiculous.
I love Vampirella. Honestly, it's more of a curiosity to me than something I genuinely like. But the thing that's so perplexing to me is how kind of hallowed and prestigious the ranks of people who have drawn her are. It's every major big leagues, holy fuck, this guy's awesome. Alejandro Gonzalez, Frank Frazetta,
Art Adams was working on her for a while, right?
Art Adams, yeah. There's so many just amazing people who were even on the writing side, in the 90s when Harris Publications was putting her out. Grant Morrison, Mark Miller, all of these big name people worked on her, and it's completely forgotten. Nobody I mean, I think that she's
Specific
cool, kind
people
of.
really remember it. It's that thing where like I feel like she is like the comic book character version of Kiss, where it's like
Mm,
there's like a very specific subset of people who are really into it, and that's what's keeping it afloat. You know what I mean? They'll like
yeah,
pick up anything that has to do with it. I
yeah.
want to. PJ Draws in the chat says, talking about the series that they do. I do a series called Lost Folk. It's about folklore and friendship with a focus on Scottish folklore. And I'll also, for anybody who's watching, just give PJ Draws a shout out. I really enjoy their art. The stuff of it that I've seen on TikTok and otherwise is really great. So definitely give them a follow and check out their book because it's good stuff.
Cool.
So let's.
Yeah,
I
there's
want
also a
to.
lot of F words in that. It's a lot of F words
Oh,
in that pitch.
well, yep.
Friends, focus, folklore. So many. I commend you for being able to say all those things.
The three Fs.
Yeah.
Folklore,
Yeah.
friendship, focus. That's all you need. Here's a question I want to ask you about. Can we talk Commandi for a second? Because you also
Fuck
seem
yeah,
like
dude.
you are a big Commandi guy. What's your take
I
on
love
Commandi?
Commandy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if anybody doesn't remember, because most of us weren't fucking alive at the time, there's like a weird dark period where what most people consider a dark period in Kirby's kind of oeuvre, where he New Gods got canceled. He went back to Marvel, did the Eternals. I personally don't like the Eternals. It's like the only thing that
Yeah.
Kirby created that I'm like, people like this?
Art's good.
Like normally, like
like unsurprisingly, the
yeah,
art's very good.
the art's good, but the Eternals, you can just feel him being heartbroken. It's not
Yeah.
fun to read for me personally. Like it's so blatant that he's just like I can't believe they took New Gods away from
Yeah.
me. Like
For sure. I feel that
and
too.
he's trying to rebuild it at Marvel, but it's
Yeah.
not really working. Yeah, I don't like Eternals.
I agree with that.
And it's just weird that they kidnap the human woman scientist in like the first issue. Like they full on kidnap
No,
her.
yeah, I've
Like
read
it's
it.
not.
The
It's
dynamic
weird.
is very
It's really
strange. But again, it feels very much like Orion with his sort of like human crew, but it's just not quite as like charming. And then you get to a splash page with the Celestials, and you're like, okay, I take it this actually might be good. Is this good? I can't tell anymore.
Yeah.
You kind of got to shut your brain off and just appreciate the art on that one, I think, a
Yeah.
little bit.
But basically through
yeah.
the back half, through the back half of the 70s, Jack was kind of like trying to get stuff going, and he was kind of, after that prestige era of running those 4 New Gods books, and then the Eternals, he came back to DC again and he was trying to get stuff together, and he did all of these books that at the time everybody hated. Like he did The Demon, Etrigan, which I love, but a lot of people didn't like at the time. He did the book that we're going to talk about, Commandi, and then he also did, after that, he did a couple things that were basically like the equivalent of the kind of comics that were being made to have Netflix deals to happen now, where Marvel was trying to shop concepts to animation companies, and they decided to leverage their connections with Jack to make Moon Boy and Devil Dinosaur. And that book was specifically made to try and get a Saturday morning cartoon off the ground, and it failed, and everybody hated it at the time. It's one of my favorites, but at the time,
ironically,
everybody hated it.
is about to become a cartoon.
Yeah, exactly. But
different,
yeah, and Amy Reeder
of course.
doing their
they
own
deserve
thing.
Their credit for
Very,
that,
very cool. But also, if there was an actual Devil Dinosaur and Moon Boy show, I would be all about that. If it was like drawn in a Kirby style or whatever, very, very cool. But I think the new stuff is cool too. That's not me being like weird comic skatey. New stuff's great. Kudos to Brendan and Amy Reeder. But Commandi falls in that weird kind of lost in the desert period where he was just basically trying to manufacture another hit. And he went to go see, urban legend varies. Some sources say that he went to go see Planet of the Apes and had this idea to do Planet of the Apes in the DC universe and pitched it to DC. Other sources say editors at DC went and saw Planet of the Apes and were like, we need one of those. And Jack Kirby heard about it and pitched on it and kind of got it.
Which, if you look at the cover of Commandi #1, one way or another, Planet of the Apes was definitely involved. Because the cover, for anyone who hasn't seen it, you basically have a copy and pasted Kirby version of the Statue of Liberty as it's seen in the final scene of Planet of the Apes. on the front
Yeah,
cover
one.
there.
Yeah.
Actually, on my wall behind me.
I recently dug out all of my Commandy issues,
Oh, nice.
and I probably have like 30 or so out of the 70 something run. And
It's worth noting, to interject real quick, it's one of the few Kirby books from that time that really had a pretty decent run, comparatively speaking. You know, obviously, if you add up,
outlasted him. He left, and they kept it going.
yeah. I mean, obviously, if you add up all the New Gods books, because there were 3 of those running at a time, because Kirby was a machine, you know, that's a pretty good chunk of comics. But like Kamandi, like you said, kept going, and they brought in a new writer and artist. Like, it's not like it got unceremoniously canceled like so many of those other books of the time.
Yeah. But Commandy is the high concept is basically there's a boy named Commandy, and he's the last human boy on Earth, and it's him wandering around having adventures with a bunch of animal people and mutants who have evolved to exist in a world where nuclear waste kills normal people, so they have lead skin.
Sure. Let's do it.
Sure. Yeah. Ben Boxer is a mutant who can exist, you know, and it's funny too because it's basically like he's like a black dude, wears like a normal kind of like weird future jumpsuit,
right?
And then oh no, there's radiation here, beep, 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 beep. And then he turns into Silver Surfer, where it's just like he's like silver and metal, and you're like, gotcha.
Right. But the interesting thing to me about that book, it's a very fun book. Like, it's a very like classical adventure kind of a thing, and like you mentioned, like cartoon show, like that's another one where I feel like if they had done an animated series like around in the sort of vein of a Johnny Quest but with Jack Kirby influences, that definitely could have been right. You can tell by Dave's face that would have been a great series. But did you
know Bruce Timm actually pitched that?
You're breaking my heart right now. That would have been so good.
There's after Superman was a hit, he went to Warner's and was like, we should do Commandy next.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, let's a Commandy. And he's like, Commandy, last boy on Earth. And they were like, what the fuck is that? So he pitched it to them, and they did I believe they did some concept art for it, and maybe a sizzle reel, but I don't even think a sizzle reel. I think it was just like he did some sketches and stuff.
Right.
And they talked about it, and his vision of it was he really wanted to just adapt the comics 1-to-1, where no new characters, just very faithfully translate Commandy onto the screen. And the head of WB at the time rightfully was like, yeah, so this is just like wall-to-wall dudes. What if we gave him like a female best friend? Can he like can we have like a strong like girl character that does stuff with him? And they were all kind of like, no, it's Commandy, last boy on Earth. If you give him no, it's Commandy. Like, this is his name, Commandy, the last boy on Earth. You can't give him a friend to the girl, no. And I don't know, from my perspective, like,
give him a friend who's like a tiger lady or something.
Yeah, Tufton, whatever the fuck that weird Three Musketeers lion guy. Make that guy a girl.
Yeah, come on, Bruce. What are we doing? But it's funny that you mentioned Bruce Timm, because I think there's a funny thing about whether it's Kamandi, whether it's Etrigan, whether it's the New Gods, whether it's, as we're seeing now, the Eternals or Devil Dinosaur, there's just something about Marvel and DC specifically. A Kirby concept will never die. People will always find a way to bring back a Jack Kirby idea. And like,
and not give him credit or any compensation.
Oh, no, that's the unfortunate part. That's the unfortunate part for sure. But there's an interesting part in the Kirby King of Comics book where Kirby talks about like when New Gods got canceled and all the Fourth World books were canceled. He's basically like, they'll appreciate it someday. And now we have his characters, Darkseid in particular, as such a central part of that universe. So the question I wanted to pose to you is, what is it that you think that people just keep coming back to those ideas for? Like, why is it that these concepts never go away, even though they were so unappreciated in their time? It's a big question, I know.
Yeah, it's a big question, especially because the trough between between the level of cultural impact that his characters and his comics have had and the recognition that he's received is so steep.
Right.
Like, they're just so,
it doesn't make sense.
No, it really doesn't. It really doesn't. It's fucking crazy, man.
Yeah.
I think the reason that they stick around is because even when they're somewhat inscrutable or incomprehensible, that they mean something to Kirby. They're all very deeply personal metaphors
absolutely.
for him. You
Absolutely.
know, like specifically Mr. Miracle.
Yeah.
Like Mr. Miracle is Jack Kirby. He, you know, Kirby feels like a guy who he saw himself as a survivor, somebody who escaped the ghetto, somebody who escaped dying in World War II, and you know, perennially kept manufacturing escape attempts for himself from you know, business deal to business deal, right?
Right.
And this is a little weird to say because I have the utmost respect for Roz Kirby. I don't think that we would have Jack Kirby without Roz, but it's a little weird to point people to these things. But Kirby habitually in interviews talks about how attracted he is to large women. Like it's
Big
like
Barda.
he talks about it incessantly, and Big Barda, you know, Big Barda,
who,
and
if I remember correctly, was visually based on the mom from My Big Fat Greek Wedding in a Playboy photo shoot that she did, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Really? Oh,
yes.
I don't think I knew that. That's
yes,
great.
from the 70s. Yeah, if you look at there's one particular like bikini that she wears that looks just like the Big Barda bikini. It's like
Oh wow.
Yeah, the exact copy of it.
Just one to one the bikini.
Yeah, and a tall woman. So what you're saying is accurate.
Yeah, there's an interview that he did with like a 19-year-old J. Michael Straczynski on YouTube. You can find it, and it's you know, it's a radio interview where they ask him about Big Barda, and he gets a little bashful for a minute, and then he kind of says like, well, you know, every short man, we all love a tall woman. We all dream of being with a tall woman. And it's like, this is a little weird for you to be saying, bro. Like, Roz is your lifeline, and she's like 2 feet tall. Come on, man. We all know you like tall ladies. Like, keep it into the fucking hat for a minute, bro.
She had a tall spirit, from what I understand.
Oh, man. Roz Kirby, big dick energy, baby. Big dick energy. Yeah.
I have to
but I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. I think they endure over time because they are so personal to him. And even if people aren't aware of those, you know, being able to decode the Matrix because they spend their free time reading zines from the 1970s or whatever, like that stuff registers, you know what I mean? Like
right.
you can feel when something is organically, genuinely idiosyncratic or unique, and when it's manufactured, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I have to point out something PJ Jarrell said in the chat. Jack was truly ahead of his time. Jack the Short King Kirby. Yeah, I think if I've learned anything from TikTok, a lot of people love tall women, and who can blame them? So he definitely ahead of his time continuously. Yeah, I also going back to like, why do these concepts keep coming back? I almost think of Kirby in the same way people talk about, I believe it's the Velvet Underground, where they say like nobody, not that many people saw their concerts, but everybody who saw their concerts started a band, right? Like talking about Bruce Timm just a moment ago. I love Bruce Timm, but so much of his work is Jack Kirby. You cannot not see the Jack Kirby influence, and his art and his style and his storytelling influenced my generation. I'm 32. Out of curiosity, how old are you?
Yeah, 33.
Okay, so yeah, like you and I, we grew up in the generation where it was just like Bruce Timm animation is what we think of when we think of a lot of those classic DC characters. And I know for me, that was how I first got exposed to Jack Kirby characters. It was the episode where Darkseid kills Dan Turpin, and it ends with the homage to Jack Kirby. And I remember watching that being like, who is that? I don't know who that is. And then from there, it all just kind of spiraled and learning about who exactly Jack Kirby was. Yeah, I think that he has just cast such a large shadow over creators specifically. And I think because of that, they all kind of want to take a crack at reviving these various characters in some way.
I think there's also the fact that he was a writer and an artist. And there's a big the middle section of that Venn diagram it overlaps a lot of like, you learn about I think in comics more so than other mediums, you learn about the people through the work, you know? Like,
Sure.
the
Definitely.
fact that I know that Brian Hitch is obsessed with drawing shoe treads. Like, I don't know why I know that, but I know that because I've read his comics, you know?
Right.
Or, you know, the fact that Grant Morrison loves, like, fucking BSM clubs or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, you just know those things when
Right.
you read comics by people. And I think it's even more apparent with Kirby specifically because you get to learn about him through his weird, bombastic, stilted dialogue, which I like, but a lot of people
Sure.
sometimes are like, ah! And then you also get to learn about him through the very unique, very specific visual lexicon that he developed for the world.
Yes.
Like, you know, the
Kirby dots.
circles on the Kirby dots, circles on the chest.
Yeah.
This, like, there's so many, even just the way he draws people's faces, these wide, almost kind of like totemic representations of the human condition.
Right.
There's just so much to unpack in a medium where for the majority of its history there isn't that much to unpack. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
Like,
especially
even
at
if
the
Jack
time
Kirby
when he
doesn't
was,
excel always at that.
Right, and even at the time when he was working, I mean, like, you look at his very early stuff, like the original Captain Americas, and like when he was doing Green Arrow for a little bit pre working with Stan at Marvel, you can see it's like a lot more conventional. But then you get into that later run of Fantastic Four, you get into that Thor stuff, and now you see like everybody's like looking out at the reader. Like that alone is so different and groundbreaking from all of the other conventional poses that you would see in superhero comics. And it's so shocking, but it also fits so well with the vibrant style that he has.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've seen his like stuff when he was really young, like The Lone Rider. Have you seen that?
The Western
weird
stuff I don't have as much familiarity with. I have some familiarity with it, but
so he did like a when I think he was like 15, 16, he did a newspaper strip that only lasted for like 10 weeks called The Lone Rider. It was a Lone Ranger ripoff. Like, it just was The Lone Ranger, and it got canceled because the radio company that owns Lone Ranger was like, nah, bro, you're fucking stealing our shit. But, like, you wouldn't even know that it's Jack Kirby. Like, it's so drastically different, which is fascinating to me that he, like, my girlfriend and I just reread the original Kirby and Lee Fantastic Four stuff. And even in there, he's like a 40-year-old man in there, and he's still not fully developed.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's so deadline oriented. It's so fast. He doesn't have the beginning stuff. He doesn't have this. He doesn't have the Kirby crackle. He doesn't have the anatomy. And then about like 20, 25 issues in, all of those things start to go like, the tumblers click into place. It's really weird.
Right. But I think that's so much of, I mean, like you said, he worked so fast. Like, for anybody who doesn't know, the man put out just an inhumane amount of work month after month, especially in the Silver Age of Marvel. But even in his DC stuff, I mean, he's doing 3 books a month that he's writing and drawing entirely himself. And
sometimes 4. Sometimes 4.
Oh, yeah, because
in the beginning he was drawing Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah, right. Of course. I always forget about Jimmy Olsen. Who could forget Don Rickles, the superhero?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and then even in those moments, he's still being inventive. Like, I love in those Fantastic Four issues when they go to the negative zone, he's doing the collage work. Like, he's just casually like throwing that out there. So radically different from everything you're seeing in the pages before.
Even like in the 70s, went during that, the Lost era where he was trying to figure out what his next thing was going to be. He was trying to get a horror magazine off the ground called Witching Hour that had a whole photo novel section in it where he wrote it, and then Mark Evanier and the other assistant from that.
Don't know, it's not my head.
Blanking on his, whatever. The other assistant. I'm so sorry. Steve Spiegel? Steve something? Whatever. It doesn't matter.
He does follow me on TikTok, actually. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He passed away.
The other one, yeah. Yeah. This assistant also wrote he was an aspiring screenwriter, and he wrote a Captain Victory and the Galactic Rangers film treatment with Kirby that they tried to sell but were unsuccessful of, which you can find online. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a thing.
if you're into that kind of thing.
Yeah. But they went, and so those two assistants went and hired actors and staged a bunch of stuff. It was like
Wow.
a island. It's kind of problematic, honestly. It's like an island of cannibals, and they kidnap some people, and they're gonna sacrifice them, and whatever. You get what it is. Yeah, and so they staged all that stuff and took photos, kind of like Fumetti, the
Right.
Italian photo comics, and Jack dialogued all the stuff over the top of it. And
That's interesting. I never heard of that before.
DC published one issue of it, and then they made 3, I think, but they only published 1. And then I want to say Fantagraphics maybe put out a collection of the one that was published and the 2 that weren't with letters from Mark and stuff like that.
Very cool. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's so funny that like we keep mentioning these like projects that didn't happen, and we express disappointment in it as if this guy like didn't also have like a completely revolutionary career, but there's like right, like it's not like some like tragic thing where it's like, oh, we missed out on all this great work. It's like, no, he has an entire body of work that revolutionized comics. Like we should be very thankful for what we had, but it's just like you think of what could have been, and there's just so much that like you would have loved to have seen from him.
He even worked on an adaptation of my favorite TV show of all time, The Prisoner.
The Prisoner.
He did like 10 pages of a Prisoner comic.
Yeah.
And then he also, like, one of my favorite movies of all time, The Black Hole. He made like 40 pages of it was a strip, a serialized newspaper strip based on the Disney movie The Black Hole.
Wow.
And then they cut it up and made it into a actual, comic book that I think was published in France and Germany and one other country, but it was never published here in the States that way.
Well, and
which is just like,
I think the thing you commented on that got us talking about Kirby was my video about 2001: A Space Odyssey, which like that is an incredible piece of work. Like it's such a fitting combination of people of Stanley Kubrick. There it is. The series itself. Which is another hilarious thing that he like does the adaptation of the Oversized Treasury and then is like, yeah, I'm just gonna keep this going. I'm just gonna have an ongoing comic where the monolith shows up in random places and shenanigans ensue. That's what it's gonna be.
And then it's even weirder. It's even weirder than that Marvel took the baby and made him Machine Man.
Yeah,
like
so 2001: A Space Odyssey technically is continuity adjacent to Marvel Comics, if you really think about it.
It's so weird. It's so fucking weird. Yeah. But I think that just goes to show you kind of, I think there are some people who might reach those twilight years of their career, and maybe they would say no to things, like,
sure,
no, I'm not gonna, because think about it, right? Like, Jack Kirby is responsible in broad strokes for the majority of comics, right?
Yep.
Like there are antecedents and people like Winsor McKay who invented a lot of the visual language, or George Harriman who really pushed like the idea of taking comics seriously even when they're funny. But in terms of comic books and a genre setting, it's like the whole industry today is based on Jack Kirby. Fuck Stan Lee. Like it's based on the bones. It's an entire 4 generations of people raiding the bones of what Jack Kirby created. And like the fact that one person could contribute all of that it makes me excited. You know what I mean? Because it makes me like, oh, just think about, like, there's gonna be another Jack Kirby.
Yeah.
Like, there's gonna be another person who pushes things in crazy directions, or incorporates new audiences into the medium in ways that we right now can't even anticipate.
Right.
And that's really uplifting and like positive and like, oh man, just one person is responsible for all of this shit. What one person is going to change the next era? You know what I mean? Right.
Yeah. And we're never going to, like you said, we're not going to know until probably we have a good chunk of hindsight behind us. But it's a staggering thing. It really is, to really look at the breadth of what he accomplished. And like you said, it's exciting. It's overwhelming. It's exciting. And that's why I did this whole week.
And also depressing as fuck that he was not appreciated in his own time.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I think the thing that's even more depressing about it to me
Yeah.
is that it's not that he wasn't appreciating his own time, which he wasn't, but it's that now, because of the second tier artistic class that comics are relegated to, and the fact that Stan Lee won a lawsuit settlement in the early 2000s to get cameos in all of these movies, even though he didn't create the characters, therefore making the layman think that Jack Kirby doesn't exist, and Stan Lee created all of these characters. Stan Lee has a fucking cameo in Captain America. He was literally the guy bringing Jack Kirby fucking coffee. He was an intern. And somehow he's managed to make people think he created Captain America.
Well, and I actually got into a little bit of debate with someone on the Funky Flashman TikTok I made where I was like, I really do think that part of what cemented Stan in the public mind currently is those movie cameos. And
100%.
I wonder, like, if Kirby had lived long enough to see the movie start, would things be different? Would people maybe have had to been forced to acknowledge Kirby more? Maybe that's an optimistic naive.
I want the answer to be yes, but
yeah.
I think the answer is no.
Yeah.
I think Stan Lee is a used car salesman, and he was really good at selling Stan Lee. He's really good at it, you know. Yeah. Jack Kirby, not so good. You know, like, I don't know if you've watched the interviews, especially later in his life, where he's kind of like, I wanted to go and create these characters so that we could have, what's that over there? Stuff, you know, like, he's very, like, you know, he wasn't doing so introvert. Well later in life.
He was never really, like, the boisterous person that Stan Lee was. And, you know, I will, let me put it this way. I definitely am a bit more like of a apologist isn't the right word. I'm a little bit more sympathetic towards Stan Lee than a lot of people, but also never debate someone who's like, fuck Stan Lee. I'm like, yeah, fuck Stan Lee. Like, I get it. Like, I feel that, because I feel that way too. Like, when I get to my lowest points and when I see, like, when I read stuff in this book where, like, publications were crediting Stan Lee with drawing the comics, I'm like, come the fuck on. You can't even be like, Kirby drew them. Like, it really is obscene how much credit he gets. And
yeah. I was just gonna say that the thing that really blew my mind is, like, I would say prior to this experience, I was somewhat more in the middle, where I was like, yeah, we all know Jack did all the work, but, you know, Stan created some of the ideas for these characters. He really kind of editorially ran things, and he positioned the dialogue and really created a branding that Jack wasn't capable of doing.
Yeah, I'll also say, like, the used car salesman aspect of it is, like, what he did was, like, make it into a brand through just the sheer force of his charisma. And it's like, that is something that is, like, gotta give him credit for that at the very least.
For real. But the moment that really pushed me over into just being the maniacal pro-Kirby radical on the far edge of this political landscape.
Don't blame you.
Yeah, I went to a gallery show. There was a college here in California that did a gallery show of Jack Kirby original pages.
Wow.
And you know, I didn't have any preconceived notions or anything. I was just like, oh yeah, fucking Kirby original. Let's go check it out. I think they had like 60-something pages. And it was, you know, that sounds cool. So get in the car, drive out there. It's way the fuck out in the valley. It's hot. I wandered around for an hour trying to find the right building on this fucking community college campus or whatever. I go into the room, and there's this huge floor-to-ceiling mural of Silver Surfer, you know, doing that.
Sure.
I'm like, this is going to be cool. I'm going to like this. This is rad. Walking around, looking at the original pages. These are really cool. You know, getting creatively jazzed to make my own comics. You know, oh, someday I can get taken advantage of by a multimedia conglomerate. And no one can remember my name except for people walking around a community college. This is going to be great.
The dream, the American dream, truly.
The American dream, right? And so in the back corner, they had a few pages. Most of it was either Commandy, and this is before I had really gotten into Commandy. Sure. Like, I had a couple issues, and I knew who he was, but I'd never really read a lot of him. But they had a bunch of Commandy pages, some Etrigan pages, and a couple random other things that I don't remember. And then in the far back corner, they had some Fantastic Four pages. And I was like, ooh, Fantastic Four. Hey, what's up? I'm going to read these. So I'm just standing there, just like looking at the pages. And, for anybody watching that doesn't know, Fantastic Four was created in what Stan coined the Marvel method, where he would come up with a brief paragraph that would say, these are the beats of the story. This guy goes over here. This happens. That over here. Dr. Doom kidnaps him, and they go over here. And then that's the end. And then he would give that to Kirby, and Kirby would make it, flesh it out, write the comic, and then Stan would come back over the top and change the dialogue. There was like temp dialogue written in the borders, and Stan would come back in and change the dialogue and finish the package and then make it what it was, right? And I'm reading these, 3 or 4 Fantastic Four pages, and it was from the Coming of Galactus 2-parter.
Mm-hmm.
And in the first part of it, Galactus shows up, and there's the very iconic page where he's standing there doing this, and it says, "Behold, I am Galactus, devourer of worlds." And there's the word balloon pasted on the page. It says, "Behold, I am Galactus, devourer of worlds." And in the top corner, there's Jack's original suggestion for what the dialogue should be, and it was, it was basically ostensibly, "I am Galactus. I am here to eat your world." Like, he put "behold"? This is what this guy gets 50% of the credit for? He put "behold"?
He put "devour" in there too, it sounds like, to be fair.
Bro, I was bowled over. I was just like, I can't believe this. This guy has usurped an entire credit for being a grammatical editor? Like, what the fuck? It blew my mind. And those pages you can find them online. Like, don't believe me. Go look at the original pages. You can see them online.
I don't know if I've seen that exact page, but I've seen very similar things where you can clearly see Kirby's notes of recommendations for dialogue, and then seeing Stan's version where it's like, it's not drastically different. There's maybe like a little bit more of the, Stanley Purple prose thrown in there, but it's not necessarily anything like radically different. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, it tripped me out. I was like, I can't believe that this is what our society thinks. If you just say you're a creator long enough, people just believe you, because in America, we think that being a creator, what is a creator? A creator is somebody who takes an idea and then implements that idea. You can't copyright an idea. You can only copyright an execution of an idea. And if you're not actively involved in the execution, you didn't create it.
Right.
But Americans don't want to think that way. Americans want to be like, well, you had the idea. It wouldn't exist without you. And it's like,
well, and then we also tend to like to give credit to the loudest voice in the room too. The person who's the loudest voice in the room is the one that's going to get paid attention to and listened to and get the credit for everything. So
completely, yeah.
For better or worse, that was Stan.
Yeah, I mean, and in comics, like, I think that's kind of a valuable lesson, in that there aren't a lot of people that are even attempting to do that. Like, there aren't a lot of people that are even raising their hand going, "Me, I'm the guy."
Right.
Like,
right.
so
especially
much of
back
it is like,
then.
well, I don't want to. Yeah.
And especially back then, where I think a lot of this stuff was just seen as like it's disposable junk that's not going to matter that much, and it's not until way further down the line that I think a lot of people realize, like, oh, I deserve more than what I ever received for this. Which I think there's a lesson in that too, to a degree. Also, while we're saying fuck certain people, can we say fuck Roy Lichtenstein? Because every time I see the painting that's just Magneto's helmet, and that's clearly a Jack Kirby version of Magneto's helmet, I want to fucking scream. I want to lose my goddamn mind. Just throwing that out there too, folks. Never forget, Roy Lichtenstein just stole Kirby and many other comic book artists' work, and
a bunch of
paid millions
Russ
for
Heath's work, a bunch of Russ Manning's work.
Yep.
Wait, Russ Manning? No, but Russ Manning. Yeah, Russ Manning.
Yeah.
A lot of romance stuff. Yeah, he just fucking stole shit. But it's artistic reappropriation, my guy.
My God, I every time there was literally an incident the other day where my wife and I were in the city, and we walked by a guy who had a Lichtenstein shirt, and I just like muttered under my breath, I'm like, "Fuck Roy Lichtenstein," and she's like, "What are you saying?" I'm like, it's the Roy Lichtenstein thing again. You know what it is. We've discussed this. But yeah,
I remember. I work at a new media company for my day job. I'm a writer producer there, and I back when we used to go into the office, that the Captain Marvel movie, the Shazam movie, was coming out,
Oh,
and
sure.
somebody that didn't really know me but knew that I made comics tangentially came up to me in the office and was like, "Oh, are you gonna go see Shazam this weekend?" And I'm like, "Yeah, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. I'm a big Captain Marvel guy, but I don't know. These DC movies, they do me wrong." And they were like, "No, it's Shazam. Name of the movie is Shazam." I'm like, "I know. And I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy because that's like the pedantic, like, the name of the monster is Frankenstein." Like, fucking, or no,
Right.
the monster's name. You know what I'm saying? You know
Yeah,
what
I
you
know
know
what
the
you're
joke.
saying. For some, the
But I
monster is
just
just
can't.
Frankenstein.
Yeah, for them, the monster is just Frankenstein,
But
and that's kind of how I feel.
that's the funny
Where I'm
thing
just
about
like,
this world that we live in now is like, not even speaking as like in a gatekeepy way. There's just this like social contract where you have to be like, does this person actually want me to go into the in-depth history as to why Captain Marvel's name is now Shazam, or do I just need to kind of roll with the punches here and be like, yeah, Shazam, right, Shazam? Because I'm the same way. I'm like, you mean Captain Marvel? His name is also Captain Marvel. There's just two Captain Marvels. We've all learned to live with it.
yeah, especially because, like, for me, names have value. They have a
Yes.
primal magical ability, and the reason why Captain Marvel is an enduring icon is because fucking CC Beck and I'm blanking on the writer, not Otto Binder, but the one before him. Whatever. We're insert reference here of the writer that created Captain Marvel that I'm blanking on, and CC Beck. Like, they captured lightning in a bottle. They took Superman, which is an almost perfect idea,
Right.
and made it 10% better. And Captain Marvel, it really is. Captain Marvel's a metaphor for that growing up can be safe and fun and exciting, even just down to the visual lexicon of how CC Beck drew Captain Marvel's face, where when he's a child, Billy Batson has these kind of like
Wide
circle eyes because he's
yeah.
innocent
Right.
and he's, a blank slate. And then when he becomes Captain Marvel, an adult, there are these kind of like weird half,
Right.
he's like, his eyes are smiling. He's like
Yeah.
smizing at you. And like, that's so like potent and amazing. And what the fuck is a Shazam?
Well, that's the thing that
You know what I mean?
pedantic nerd shit. It's like, but when he says Shazam, he turns into Captain Marvel, so he can't say his own fucking name.
Yeah.
If his name is Shazam, then he's just going to turn back into Billy Batson. What are we even doing now? Like, what have we done here?
Yeah. And like, I don't know. I love the, I don't love the racism. There's a lot of weird racism in those Fawcett, CC Beck comics. Not a big fan of that. Not a fan of that at all. But I love those Captain Marvel comics because CC Beck is a brilliant cartoonist. He's a criminally underrated cartoonist. And I have many feelings about Captain Marvel. And when people come up to me and are like, yeah, so like, you see that Shazam? I'm like, oh.
So we'll add him to the list with Steve Gerber of other people we'll have to talk about in the future at some point.
Yeah, I'm so about it, man. I love Steve Gerber. We were talking about yesterday. Yeah, I'm a huge Steve Gerber fan.
Yeah, Howard the Duck is one of my favorites. I got that full run. It's incredible. So to kind of wrap things up, I wanted to ask you, as someone who is also both a writer and artist, how do you feel like Kirby has had an impact on you personally as a creator, as a writer, as an artist? How has his legacy and his work that you've read and enjoyed, how has that influenced you?
Oh, man. I think there's a couple ways I could answer that. I think one of them is that every artist who comes in contact with the concept of the Kirby barrier instantly feels bad about themselves all the time, which for anybody who doesn't know, the Kirby barrier is that Jack Kirby drew 4 pages a day. So, there's some days where I can draw 4 pages a day, and then there are other days where I do not draw 4 pages a day. So I think that's that's a very pedantic way of answering that question. But that's one. The other question, or the other reason, is that I think the two people that are most responsible for the comic book industry still being alive after the Kefauver hearings and the mass censorship of the Comics Code Alliance, which, just as an aside, it drives me crazy when people wear Comics Code shirts out in public at like conventions. Like, you realize that's like, they're like a censorship organization that like fucked the whole medium.
They're
right?
not
Like, that's like
great.
wearing, like,
they're rooted in a
No,
lot of
they're-
shitty attitudes and beliefs.
those are the bad guys. Like, you don't realize that those are the literal bad guys?
Yeah.
But yeah, so, you know, there's the two people that comics are most indebted to, which we never talk about, are fucking Jack Kirby, because every one of these companies, whether it's Marvel or DC or any of the independent companies that have had trickle-down effects from those two, you know, superhero companies, they're indebted to Jack Kirby because most of them are just recycling his ideas. And then the other person that I think we don't talk about enough is fucking, oh my god, I'm blanking on his name. He's the guy who created the direct market. What the fuck is his name?
I don't even know that name.
I know his name.
Guy
and this
who
is killing
created
me.
the guy who created...
So basically, in the late 60s, early 70s, he went to Marvel and DC and got them to sell him books at wholesale. This is before
Phil Seuling?
Yes, Phil Seuling. Fuck, thank you so much. God damn it. I had it at the beginning of the paragraph, and then the aside about Kirby and the Kirby barrier fucked me up. Yeah, Phil Seuling went to Marvel and DC and was just like, hey, you know that there's this new burgeoning market of people that are flipping comics. They're going to newsstands, buying them, and then selling them in their own shops. I think I could probably act as like a distributor. I could like just sell me the comics at wholesale, and we can do this. And they were like, no, that's not going to happen.
Which,
so basically,
quick interjection there. Reading in the Captain Victory comics, there's one of the letters to the editor where somebody's like, I don't buy comics at a comic book store. I get them at the 7-Eleven. Can you get these Captain Victories to 7-Eleven? And then them responding with something along the lines of like, we think the direct market might be the future of comics. And I was like, boy, they were very right.
Yeah. But yeah, so Phil Seuling basically went to them and played them off against each other. He lied to them. He went to DC and was like, Marvel's going to do this. You in? And they were like, oh, fine. And then he went to Marvel and was like, DC's in. You going to do this?
Wow.
Oh, fine. And so every comic book store since has basically just been descended from Phil Seuling's vision of like, comics need to be preserved and the newsstands are dying. You know, I go to, well, not now because there's fucking, you know, pandemic, but I go to conventions and people are constantly like, the comics wouldn't exist without Stan Lee. No, comics wouldn't exist without fucking Phil Seuling and Jack Kirby. And so as somebody who makes comics and has put out comics in the direct market, I'm very thankful that both of them didn't decide to take a nap instead of, you know, pursuing comics more.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Well said. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. This was awesome. I wanted to share something in the chat. Comic Concierge said, I know someone who got a tattoo of the Comics Code, which I think, as the kids would say, sounds like cop behavior. And then the PJ Draws says, it's like someone in Eurasia walking around in a Big Brother t-shirt, which I thought was a good comparison there. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's the people. I've seen people who have Comics Code Authority tattoos before, and I think that's just more than like, instead of hating the player, hating the game, that's more just an evidence of like how much how there's a lack of comics history or understanding, that there's a lack of comics academia. You know, like I don't think that people understand that the reason that happened is because Estes Kefauver, who was a senator from the South, organized a televised congressional hearing to basically hold court in public opinion about what comic books were doing to young people. And he had two star witnesses, Bill Gaines, the publisher of EC Comics, who at the time was addicted to Dexedrine, and a psychologist who was not addicted to anything, called Frederick Wortham, and they gave them each, basically Sermon on the Mount time, right? And they softballed Frederick Wortham, who's like, if you want to train a generation of people to beat stormtroopers, there can never be a better weapon than the comic books. And then fucking, they go to lunch, and Bill Gaines comes back, and he's like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to defend this artistic medium.
My favorite.
And then he fucking comes down off of it, and he like starts out, and then he starts out great, and then he comes down off of his high on dextrine, and he's answering questions weird and slurring his speech. And so it goes horribly. The nation goes, yeah, comic books are probably bad for everyone. And then to save face, all the rest of the publishers got together and were like, we're going to form a censorship organization. We're going to kick Bill Gaines out. We're going to stop them from publishing comics. And we're going to make sure nobody publishes anything like that ever again. And so they outlawed vampires, werewolves, crime stuff. Like
it's so funny reading the list, because I'm like,
legacy.
you were directly targeting EC Comics with all of this. I'm pretty sure there's one that's like, you can't have a title with like horror in it, and like there's clearly a comic book called The Vault of Horror, there's Tales of Horror, there's all this stuff just directly targeting them. I love, and I think this is true because I read it in the book The 10-Cent Plague, which is a good kind of summary of what you've just described. But in the questioning, they hold up an image of I think Tales from the Crypt cover, which is a pretty famous one, where it's the like sort of like waist down view of a guy holding a severed head of a woman and an axe in the other hand. And they present it to Bill Gaines. They're like, you don't think there's anything wrong with this? And Gaines is like, no. And they're like, why? And he's like, well, it's not like he's holding it up. It's not like there's blood dripping out. This is like pretty tame, relatively speaking. It's like not the best way to answer that, Bill. That's not at all what would have helped you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so weird that you brought that book up. I don't know if I should say this publicly, but I'm going to anyway, because no one's watching this, right? It's fine.
At least 4 people. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's fine, right? I've optioned the 10-Cent Plague.
Whoa!
Yeah.
That's very exciting. For like a screenplay?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, basically, my buddy Steve Bagatorian and I, he wrote the Tupac movie that came out in 2017, 2018.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he and I have optioned the book and are developing it, and have some meetings and stuff. Who knows where this fucking it probably won't go anywhere, but it's cool.
Well, I had a conversation with someone in my TikTok comments recently where I was like, there's so much in the history of the comic book industry that would make for such a great film or TV show or something, and that would be for sure one of the great stories to tell. So dude, good luck.
Agree.
I'm rooting for you. I can't wait to
we'll see.
That
we'll
happen.
see how it goes. Yeah, we'll see. It's an interesting time. I'm not going to say anything else publicly, but it's an interesting time navigating the back alleys of the industry. It's very interesting.
Well, congrats on all your success, dude. If anybody out there watching does not already follow Dave, please do so. You'll get some awesome progress videos of his upcoming. Is it a series? Is it a graphic novel? Mary Tyler Moore book?
It's a graphic novel.
It looks so awesome. I can't wait for it.
Thank
dude.
you.
Like every time you post a new video of it, I'm like, this looks like my shit so much. This just looks so great.
I'm fucking pumped about it. Right now I'm dealing with 2 different publishers. We're trying to figure out which one of them is gonna publish the book. We'll see. But yeah, it's called Mary Tyler Moorhawk, and it is a kind of adventure comic, Johnny Quest style, where
Commandy style, even perhaps.
It is. It's very Commandy. Yes. Where half the comic is this kind of like end of the world, globe-trotting mystery adventure comic starring a 12-year-old girl adventurer that's kind of like Nancy Drew or Johnny Quest, called Mary Tyler Moorhawk, and it's her and her extended family of supporting weird, kooky characters trying to save the world. And then the other half of the book, that's all comic stuff. It's probably about 150 pages of comics. And then the other half of the book is they're magazine articles from 100 years in the future, where there is a journalist also named Dave Baker who's obsessed with a TV show that got adapted from the comic, and he's trying to learn about the behind the scenes, and he ends up tracking me down. I'm like 200 years old, cyborg, and it's pretty weird. It gets pretty weird and meta, and I'm very excited about it, and it's slowly inching towards being done.
You had me at just the title, Mary Tyler Moorhawk, and now just hearing this, I'm even more excited than I already was. So I can't wait, man. I can't wait.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks to everybody who stuck around, who watched. We talked for like an hour and a half there. That was a lot of time. That was great. But yeah, we'll do this again. We'll find some other comic creator we feel like is underappreciated and underloved, and we'll chat for an hour and a half about them too.
I mean, look, man, we didn't even talk about Phantom Force. You know,
That's on me.
My
I
fucking
apologize.
props
That's
ready.
on me.
I mean, I could have brought it up. I was the one being like,
No, this was awesome. Thank you so much, dude.
yeah, for real, man.
All right. Have a good night and happy birthday to Jack Kirby.
Happy birthday, Jack. We love you.
Good night, folks.